All right, with your permission, I will call the meeting to order. Warm welcome to everyone, and anyone I haven't wished a Happy New Year, Happy New Year. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. First order of business, approval of our agenda, and I believe we have an addition, Julie.
We do, yes. We have a presentation from ExploreNet, so I'd like to welcome Steve to today's meeting.
All right. Do we need to approve an addition, or is that fine? Okay.
No, we had your consent, Mr. Warden.
All right. I was in good mood that day, certainly. Do we do the adoption of the minutes first?
Adoption of the December 17th minutes, yes.
All right, I'd look for a mover and a seconder for approval of those. Moved by Justin. Okay, Justin and Dominique. Any questions on the minutes? If not, please call the vote.
Mr. Warden, there's a small issue with the minutes on item 3 and 10. The recorded vote doesn't match the attendees at the meeting. I think it's just a cut and paste error likely, but Dave Mennel wasn't in attendance.
Okay.
We can fix that.
All right, so with that small amendment, go ahead. Catherine, are you calling the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Councillor Giguère.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
I don't know how to proceed with this as I was not at the meeting.
Abstain?
I think would probably be the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Andrews?
Yes.
Justin Pennings?
Yes.
And Warden Marks?
Yes.
4-0, the motion is carried.
Sorry, Catherine, it's 3-1. But the motion is
3-1.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anyone else getting the feedback I'm getting? Do we need to mute, or is it? How's that? I'm still hearing it.
Looks like it's coming from Mr. Andrews.
Let's try it again. That is better. All right, thank you for that vote. I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof. I'm not seeing any hands up or any wiggling, so we'll assume none. And we do have a delegation, Steve Van Groningen from ExploreNet. Steve, welcome. And without any further ado, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Warden, and thank you to the committee for accommodating me today on short notice. I appreciate you making time for my presentation. As introduced, my name is Stephen Groningen. I am the Manager of Corporate Affairs for ExploreNet Communications, and I am here today to talk a bit about what ExploreNet Communications does and what our plans are for the future in Elgin County. As you, I'm sure, are all aware, the federal government's Universal Broadband Fund is open for applications right now up until its deadline of February 15th. ExploreNet is currently working on a number of proposals to make to that broadband fund, one of which does for Elgin County. So my purpose today in coming to speak to you is to make a request for a letter of support from Elgin County for the application that we're planning to make. So if you'll just allow me a few moments, I will tell you a little bit about ExploreNet and what we're planning. So ExploreNet is the largest rural-focused internet service provider in Canada. We serve about 1 million Canadians every day. That's about 375,000 people in Ontario who are using our services. ExploreNet is a relatively young company. We were founded in Woodstock, New Brunswick about 15 years ago. But from there, we have grown considerably through a lot of investment in our our rural broadband network across Canada. So today we have a presence across the country in Atlantic Canada, of course, but as well in Ontario, in Markham, in Cornwall, and in Brantford. We keep a lot of our, or all of our customer service and customer support functions domestic. So if a customer in Elgin County is trying to reach us, for a technical support or an account question, they are getting connected to someone who is probably working in Cornwall, Ontario. We have built out a rural broadband network across the country with a considerable amount of investment in the last 15 years. Just on our own, we've invested over $1.5 billion to build out a network of over 2,300 fixed wireless tower sites and a constellation of 5 4G satellites that we have in operation today. But with this background in wireless and satellite internet, what we are increasingly recognizing and working towards as a company is the increased deployment of fiber in rural areas. We know that the capacity and the speed that fiber connections and fiber backbones can offer to our network is something that our customers are looking for. And so as we look towards our applications to the Universal Fund, we are looking towards a very significant fiber component in the projects that we're rolling out. On our own, we have made significant steps this year towards enhancing the services that are available to customers who are connecting to ExploreNet in rural Ontario. Today, ExploreNet is offering speeds at 50 megabits per second across our LTE wireless network. And that includes unlimited data packages as well. We are working towards meeting the 50/10 target just on our existing network. We have deployed services at the 50/10 level, so 50 megabits per second download and 10 megabits per second upload in New Brunswick. We did so last year, and we are planning to deploy 50/10 services across Ontario throughout 2021. We are also working towards the deployment of 5G services on our wireless network. We announced last year that ExploreNet will be starting our 5G deployment in about the middle of this year in 2021. And that's going to take place throughout our network throughout the remainder of this year. We also announced at that time that we are going to be working with Ericsson as our technology partner for the 5G deployment. Now, coming back to the topic of the Universal Broadband Fund, now I'm sure you're all aware that the fund has been open since the fall. They are accepting applications for their core projects, core and large impact, until February 15th. The goal of the fund is to deliver 50/10 services to identified underserved households across Canada. Now, where ExploreNet wants to make use of this fund is actually to deploy infrastructure in rural areas that will exceed the 50/10 targets. So, on our own, we are working at deployments that are going to meet the 50/10 level. And with public investment, we're looking to deploy services that are going to get ahead of it and position networks that will be scalable for the future to accommodate the kinds of demand that we have. We were seeing increasing before 2020, and certainly with the pandemic, we saw a lot of the sort of pre-existing trends towards remote work, online learning, streaming for entertainment come to a head and have a significant impact on our network and on the services that we provide to people. So with the deployments that we're looking at for Elgin County, ExploreNet is looking at deploying fiber services at 1 gigabit per second as a download speed, and our wireless services at 100 megabits per second. So the model is that we would deploy a fiber backbone throughout, generally speaking, on a regional scale throughout southwestern Ontario. We would deploy a fiber backbone through Elgin County. And then we would deploy fiber to the home services off of that backbone in certain areas. And we would also use it to connect our existing wireless sites to fiber. So once we connect the sites to fiber, we're able to offer a lot more capacity and a lot more speed. So we can offer packages at the 100 megabit per second level. We do anticipate that a significant number of households in Elgin can be connected through the project that we're planning to submit to the Universal Broadband Fund. With a deployment of about 170 kilometers of fiber through Elgin County, we anticipate that we're going to be able to reach about 1,500 households through the fiber to the home deployment at a gigabit per second. And then connections to our wireless tower sites that we have in place in Elgin will expand the coverage zone considerably further. I don't have a precise estimate for the number of households that we connected by wireless at this point, but I would estimate it would be considerably higher than the 1,500 that are being connected by fiber. So as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, our hope is that Elgin County will be willing to provide us with a letter of support for the application. Certainly we have been serving customers in the county both by wireless and satellite for quite a number of years. And with the project that we're planning to take to the Universal Broadband Fund, we'd like to position ourselves to continue to provide service to residents in Elgin County for the coming years with faster speeds and considerably larger amounts of data available to them. So I'm certainly happy to take any questions that the members of the committee have, but otherwise I thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for the presentation, Steve. I will at this time open the floor for any questions for you. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you and committee members to Steve, Elgin County Council supports the SWIFT network and the initiative. We know the RFP is closing tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I'm just wondering if for the committee's information, you could just touch upon how your initiative might complement the SWIFT initiative.
So ExploreNet has participated with SWIFT in other parts of Ontario. You will be able, it's public knowledge now, of course, we were awarded a number of SWIFT projects in Grey County and Bruce County. We will, the issue with the SWIFT process right now, of course, is that we don't know what submissions are being made or which projects that SWIFT is going to select for Elgin County. Certainly we will presumably know in short order, and because the SWIFT projects themselves are meant to be open access, they certainly will offer additional points by which ExploreNet can connect and build its network further in the county.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for Steve? Mike, go ahead.
Hi, Steve. First of all, thanks very much for the presentation. I think it's great that ExploreNet's going ahead with this application, and wish you the best of success with that. I probably know the answer to this question, but would you be willing to share with the committee or put the project in some kind of context geographically with us for the county?
Yes, I can give you a bit of detail. As this is a public meeting, some elements of what we're planning to submit on our application, they're commercially sensitive for us, so I don't necessarily want to put them up on the screen. But what I can tell you certainly is that we are looking at fiber to the home deployments in a few different regions of Elgin County. Certainly there are some areas just outside of St. Thomas where we would be proposing to deploy fiber to the home, and certainly as well in communities like Corinth and North Hall as well are part of our submission. Now that is not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the areas that we've looked at.
Thanks, Steve.
Further questions for Steve?
Mr. Chair, it's Dominique.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Steve. And just to follow up on Mike's questions, would you say right now that the areas you're considering are very much underserved? So as opposed to perhaps they have okay service and you're trying to improve the service, or as you know, we have areas that have next to no service. Is that part of your consideration in terms of geography?
Yes. So Because we are looking at deploying a project that has both a fiber component and a wireless component, the project that we're submitting to the Universal Broadband Fund should be able to provide, considerably improved services to large parts of Elgin County. There will be fiber service in areas where the density makes that a logical case. But for areas beyond that, we have wireless sites which will be able to push out 100 megabit per second coverage to a considerably wider area.
Thank you. And certainly that would be, we address significant gaps as opposed to enhancing areas where there's this, but that we would support your application because of where it can address significant gaps.
I certainly agree with that, Steve. I'm fairly familiar with your company. I get a lot of correspondence in my mailbox on a regular basis, and I knew you're from the East Coast because for quite a while I had a conversation probably every 2 or 3 weeks with a lovely young lady who routinely called me. But whenever, and I was very, very much wanting to do business with someone, but it wasn't available. So if it's improved, I'm looking forward to that. So that's good news. But at the time, it just wouldn't work in our area. Further questions for Steve? Julie? Go ahead, Julie, and then Joshua.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a quick housekeeping item. Steve, when do you require this letter in order to include it in your submission? Oh, he lost the audio.
Oh.
So it would seem that we're able to communicate with Steve through the chat. So, Mr. Warden, if you want to proceed with Joshua's question, we can do our best that way.
By all means, Joshua, go ahead with your question, please.
No, the question to Steve was about the choice of the city they have chosen. Is it due to feasibility of the available infrastructure, or like already other services that they can easily run their fiber, as opposed to other cities within the county?
I'm not sure, Steve, if you heard that or if someone's typing it to you. Looks like Catherine's on doing it already.
Yes, so I sent Steve a note, and we'll just wait for his reply. And in case any member of the public is unable to see Steve's response through the chat, I'll just confirm that he noted the deadline for submission is February 15th, and he would appreciate the letter by early February if possible.
All right.
And he just confirmed he's going to sign out and try to sign back in, which is great.
Really good idea. We'll give him a second. Hopefully it works.
So should you wish, Mr. Warden, to submit a letter on behalf of the Connectivity Committee, that process could certainly be directed by this group. Alternatively, there does seem to be enough time for us to take this matter to County Council for their consent, with the recommendation, of course, either way from the Connectivity Committee.
Very good. Is that a question you've got, Duncan? Or are you muting yourself?
What I'm, I guess a question to our guest is that we're supporting an initiative on behalf of our residents for expansion, which is a good thing. But my concern is there any guarantees from ExploreNet public money that the service that they provide is as advertised?
There, Steve is back, so let's hopefully he can get back on and answer. We'll give him a chance. Can you hear us, Steve? I think from time to time, we've all been asked to give a reference. And unless we know that person and give a good reference, so we're putting our own reputation at risk. So I understand Duncan's concern there. Have you joined us, Steve?
If I may, your chair, it's Cecil from Alahide. And I might be able to answer Duncan's question, or at least
Go ahead.
partially answer it. I'm sure Mike might be able to chime in on this. My understanding is with some of these grants that are being provided, universal broadband and even the ICON grant, that part of the requirement is that you need to demonstrate that you are meeting the minimum requirements. So if the endorsement letter is just to basically say, yes, we support the project that they're doing, that's all that it really involves from the municipality standpoint. But in order for them to qualify for the funding, they have to be able to demonstrate that the speeds that they're saying they're able to maintain the minimum 50/10 is indeed possible, and they have to prove it before they'll get their funds released to them. At least that's my understanding with the ICON grant, and I would imagine that the universal broadband is probably similar. If I could, I'll just ask Mike, maybe he can confirm that based on his own PacketWorks experience.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Cecil. Actually, I'm more familiar with ICON as you are with than the federal one, but any of the federal programs that I've involved with in the past, they're pretty sticky about meeting those thresholds and not just saying you're going to do it, actual proof of performance once the build is underway or completed before the money all rolls anyway. I think part of the concern probably that Duncan has raised is ExploreNet has typically been a satellite delivered service, and there are issues around that. It's challenging. Latency is one of the large ones, but certainly in a fiber network that they're proposing, I don't think that would be as much of an issue. And even their LTE service is far superior on a performance basis than their satellite delivered service. So, but I hear your concerns for sure, Duncan.
So fine. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say while we wait. Just a question. Go ahead.
Are you back, Steve?
Yeah, sorry. I seem to have had some problem with the audio on my computer here that cut all of you off. Well, I think Dominique was finishing her question. My video still worked, but I couldn't hear any of you, so I'm terribly sorry about that.
No problem. Do you remember what you were saying, Dominique, or should we start all over?
No, I was just going to inquire as to whether we've written letters of support. I couldn't remember offhand, and to address Julie's question as to whether we should go to council. So first, I wanted to check if there was a precedent, whether previous letters were through council.
Yes,
Go ahead,
committee might recall that there was one request from Bell, I believe, and that request did go through council. And I believe that was more so related to timing than anything. So we happened to have they needed a tight turnaround, and we had a council meeting sooner than we had a connectivity committee. But I think ordinarily and moving forward, the process should be that the committee reviews these requests and makes a determination at that time based on the timing of the required letter of support, whether it go to council or be handled through the warden on behalf of the committee and by extension council.
And it looks like our calendar will work. We can take it to council and there's still enough time. So are there any questions further to Steve? Duncan, your hand's up. Go ahead. I'm
just trying to refresh my memory. I I believe, Steve, you might have been invited to our connectivity forum that the county held recently. I don't know whether that invitation was sent out to ExploreNet or not. Do you recall? Do you recall?
I don't believe I received an invitation from Elgin or about a connectivity forum recently.
I don't know if staff remembers. Was an invitation sent to ExploreNet?
I'm going to defer that question to the planning committee. Jim?
I'm just looking at my notes offhand because Catherine was the one who sent out the invite, so I don't remember off the top of my head which ones she included.
Looks like it was not Steve. Potentially another representative from ExploreNet received the invitation.
I believe so.
See, this is one of the concerns that as to the role of this committee, and I think one of the things that we have to keep in focus is somewhat of coordination across the county as to who is doing what. Currently, in my conversations with Bell, certainly they're very tight-lipped about any of the projects that they're looking at doing. That seems to be with the larger corporations, and I think what the warden and I have found with our experiences of SWIFT, everything is very, very confidential, and certainly as a county-wide committee trying to coordinate a future broadband expansions in the county. If everybody is doing their work underneath a basket, we really don't know what is being done or who is doing it, and that's going to make it very difficult for us to try to tie some kind of picture together of coordinating it across the county. And maybe that's just the way it's going to be. About it, I know when Bell asked me at a last moment for a letter of support to Bell, and I asked him, well, that's fine, but what are you going to do for my municipality? Well, he couldn't tell me. So I wasn't too forward on coming up with a letter of support for him when there was no information coming forward for me to make that decision. So I understand it that ExploreNet has to do their thing, but it would be really nice if there was some way that we could keep in contact, or at least keep this committee informed of what the plans are when it gets to a point that they can be released to the public. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Steve, but something maybe for your corporation to consider.
I am certainly happy to stay engaged with the committee beyond today. You will have my contact information, so you're certainly welcome to reach out with any further questions. But if we are awarded projects in Elgin County, our practice is in other regions of Ontario is to certainly return to talk in more detail about what is going to be rolled out.
All right. We've had a good discussion. Any more questions for Steve? Julie and then Dominique.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to circle back and ensure that Joshua's question was addressed. Joshua, I'm not sure if you want to provide a recap now, but we do have a loose record of it, let's say, in the chat box. So whatever your preference is at this time.
Go ahead, Joshua.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Steve, I was just asking about the choice of St. Thomas and other towns. Is it based on the feasibility on the infrastructure in place, or just a choice of those towns as opposed to density, as you suggested? Because there might be another town elsewhere that might not have the infrastructure. Are you able to provide that as well to make sure that they have that service to reach there?
Yeah, for sure. And sorry that I missed your question earlier. The choices for our routes in the areas that we look to deploy services have a couple of different factors involved. In particular, for the Universal Broadband Fund, one of the major considerations are which areas that the federal government considers eligible. So the federal industry or ISA department that's running this program has a map that they've compiled that shows on a road by road level which areas they consider served and which areas they don't consider served. And so as we design these networks, for submissions to those funds, that is always a major consideration. We can't build into areas that they won't allow us to or don't want us to go into. But beyond that, there are a variety of considerations. Population density can determine which technologies we deploy in certain areas. With areas where the density is higher, fiber to the home is a possibility. In areas where the density is lower, that's where we look at deploying wireless sites to try to catch a large number of households with a central wireless site that's connected to fiber. We do look at what kind of infrastructure is in place already in terms of if there is another company may have a fiber backbone that we can build off of to pick up a circuit for our own network. In terms of setting up wireless sites, we do look at what kind of tower infrastructure is in place in a given area. So if another company or municipality has a wireless tower somewhere, we do look at whether we can make use of that kind of infrastructure to provide services. But there are different reasons why sometimes we have to decide to go out and put up our own new sites in different areas.
Dominique, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be interested in hearing from Steve if you think about who in your organization was contacted about the forum and what the correspondence, and if there was any discussion about the decision not to attend, and if indeed, so we'll assume somebody was invited, because I want to make sure that this relationship, as I think Duncan alluded to, it has to be a two-way partnership. And so if you can find out what the decision process was. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly.
Duncan?
As we're supporting ExploreNet for public funds to install a fiber backbone in Elgin County, will that fiber be made available to smaller service providers that are interested in taking on markets that may not be attractive to ExploreNet because they are small, or is it going to be a proprietary network that is for ExploreNet's use only?
No, the network is, it will be open access. The Universal Broadband Fund has open access requirements for whatever projects they're funding, so we will certainly be following all of those, and the network will be open for third-party access.
And will ExploreNet be make the decision on what the cost of that access is, or is there something in the language that guarantees that it will be accessed at affordable price?
Yeah, I believe that the Universal Broadband Fund will have ongoing requirements as to how that access is managed and priced and governed. So we'll be complying with that to stay within the spirit of the requirements and the program.
Thank you for that. Mike, your hand was up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Steve, one of the other concerns the committee has over and above availability of broadband itself is affordability. Can you share with the committee what typical retail rates would be for your services, and give us an idea if there will be installation charges for customers to your network?
Traditionally, there are installation charges. They will vary from about $49 to about $99. We offer a variety of different packages at varying price points. for the sort of top level services, the largest value packages that we provide, they're generally priced at about $100 to $115 a month price point. So that's where you're getting about the 100 megabit per second packages that would be made available as a result of the construction of this network. The bigger fiber packages will be in that range as well.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'm just a follow-up, more of a comment than anything. I know you, like the rest of the universe, is relying on the Industry Canada mapping, and it's 1,000-fold better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But there's still issues with that mapping right here in Elgin County. I know, just as an example, it shows the small community of Eagle as eligible for service and underserved on the mapping, and it's absolutely well served. North Frontenac's fiber runs right through Eagle and it's fully serviced, and yet it shows as unserviced. The little community that I live just outside of Richmond down here in Bayonne shows as a serviced area not eligible, and I can assure you my 1.8 megabit DSL service is a long ways from 5010. So there are issues with that mapping, and I would actually encourage exploring that to look at that. I know in ICON there is the ability to challenge the mapping in your applications, and I'm not sure about the federal program, but I believe that's the case with them as well. So what you see on paper right here in Elgin County is not necessarily 100% reflective of what's available to people.
We recognize that. We have cooperated with ISED in terms of providing our own network data to try to inform their mapping exercises. But certainly, I've seen more than a few examples of where there are some local inaccuracies in the mapping data, and I think they depend on heavily, if not on providers, then sort of local communities, municipal governments to try to inform them when they see something that's not quite right.
All right, very good. Appreciate that, Steve. I think we'll move on. Thank you for your presentation. This committee will be giving a recommendation to County Council, and we'll certainly be in touch. But on behalf of the committee, thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to present this afternoon. I apologize for my technical difficulties earlier, but I appreciate your patience, and I wish you a good day.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, bring back our planning session 1. Julie, I think you're up on that. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Through you to committee members, in December at the committee's last meeting, you received a copy of the Roma Broadband Connectivity Municipal Roadmap publication. And there seemed to be some interest on behalf of the committee of taking a deeper dive into this publication. And what we've done today is prepare a brief presentation that will hopefully carefully walk through this document and provide committee members with the opportunity to have some important discussions with respect to what a made in Elgin solution to our connectivity challenges might look like, and what the committee might be looking for in terms of staff direction and county council support in terms of funding. So the first step is just an overview of the purpose and a bit of background. So just as a reminder, regulatory and funding roles for telecoms fall primarily within the federal and provincial governments, though investing in connectivity does remain a choice at the municipal level, because governments don't have a mandated role, but governments definitely do have an interest in finding a solution. We've certainly seen what pressure exists across Elgin County. We had 434 responses to our connectivity survey that was issued in the fall. And as well, worth noting, on page 4 of the roadmap, there's a quote, connected communities are more likely to have economic prosperity, recover faster, and compete in a global market. So we'll advance to the next screen, which is 6 components of the roadmap that is included in this document. The first one is to some advice for councils and by extension committees to learn the basics. This document has 2 parts. One is a primer and one is a roadmap. We'll post links to both of those on the Connectivity Committee's webpage or landing page on our county website. The second step, which I think the committee has already made some great progress in, is assessing local needs. So they recommend assessing a current state of connectivity in the community. So what exists now, where is it located, and what future infrastructure plans exist. Establish a working group, and that is exactly what this is. Map layers of connectivity. Admittedly, there's more work to be done here, as Mike just pointed out. Understand drivers and be open for creative solutions. The third step is to evaluate possible roles for a local council. And the next slide will be discussing the spectrum of broadband options and determine where the committee might recommend to council we are on the spectrum and where we'd like to be. Leverage existing tools, so evaluate best practices, and I think this is ongoing for the committee. Use and leverage potential tools municipal governments already have in place to manage connectivity needs, and there is a slide later in the presentation to address that. Champion connectivity, and I think by virtue of being on this committee, we have some pretty great champions already. So create a compelling narrative, use what data to drive the business case, and for why building connectivity is important. Invest strategically and look for partnerships, and we will get to that as well. So the next step is to look at the spectrum of broadband options. And you'll see that on one end is the option to let the market operate on its own. And you'll see the note at the bottom, this is what has largely existed. And on the other end is for the municipal government to own and operate its broadband network. And then in between are the options to advocate for action from other levels of government, create incentives for telecom providers and internet service providers to create their own networks. And last is to build a network and let the TSP or ISP operate it. There are some key questions, and I think we should, with your consent, Mr. Warden, stop after this slide and have a more fulsome discussion. But the guide recommends that we discuss where on the spectrum you want to be. Is there enough digital literacy and capacity to build, maintain, and sustain such a system at the municipal level? Are there economies of scale that can be leveraged to build enough demand that ISPs would be interested? And what level of control and risk would you recommend council assume? So some advice that is important to note before the discussion begins is it's important that municipal governments do not assume that the problem will be solved entirely for them by provincial and federal governments or the private sector. So that means although connectivity is not a core municipal service, all municipal governments ought to understand the role they want to play. And the key message here is to be realistic about how difficult it may be to maintain and be honest about the level of digital capacity and resources available. So a realistic solution is what they're recommending. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Warden, before we proceed further.
Thank you, Julie. First thought that popped into my head is I remember at our strategic meetings when Elgin County Council identified broadband improvement to our residents was a top-notch priority. I don't think that has changed. So rather, we're at the point maybe of really reinforcing that. So open the floor for comments, and I appreciate there's some passion. You know, if you have good internet service, it's quick to forget how bad it is when you didn't have it. I'll throw it out to the floor for questions and thoughts. Duncan?
Well, when it comes to the necessity of broadband in our community, I had a council meeting this morning. I had one member of council that his internet is so well, he doesn't have any. He had to go to whole building to participate in the meeting. He was the only counselor that was there. I had another one that struggled the whole meeting by being dropped on, dropped off, and certainly my council understands the necessity of connectivity in our community, and I can't stress enough of their willingness to take on a role and responsibility as municipal government to expedite that as quickly as we possibly can, and with whatever tools are available to us. And I'm sitting here right now, just recently being connected to a server that I receive out of Chatham, Kent. I pay $55 a month for an unlimited service. I just did a speed test on it, and I'm getting a 28 download and a 13 upload on that service. It's working really, really well for me. It's allowing me to participate in the meeting. That was provided to me by a local ISP that, as an entrepreneur, that is trying to connect people that have fell through the cracks to internet service. And so I think that we have to do what we can, however we can do it. Certainly, from my perspective, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that that broadband was not did not get a placeholder in the proposed Elgin County budget coming forward to County Council in the next few weeks. But certainly that was a decision that was made, but it's going to make it very difficult for this committee to operate, I think, without at least being recognized as an essential service in Elgin, and it's been demonstrated by a lot of our residents that is a concern that they have. And as Julie said, it's something that the upper tiers of government are not going to solve for. So if we don't work together as a committee and try to do what we can to expedite broadband in our respective communities, nobody else is going to do it for us, and it's going to be a challenge to this committee to come up with a best solution that we can to service as many people as we can. So certainly I'm looking forward to working with this group over the next little while to make sure that we have done everything that we can to make that happen.
Thank you, Doug. Other comments? Dominique, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the question on the table right now is where on the spectrum we would like to, where we would see an Elgin-made solution. I think I'm basing my answer on the fact that now we've heard clearly that the business case is not going to be there, likely ever, for ISPs in areas where there's low density. So I think, to me, I'm using the criteria that I think we can take on the role of removing barriers for ISP and contributing to that business case. And that may mean, I'm thinking, building infrastructure that once is there, then would be operated. So I would lean toward, going as potentially at least feasibility and some of the costs, going as far as number 4. on the spectrum. I do not think in the long term I would want to own or operate. I think the issues of literacy and capacity, I think we have to stay in our lane as far as, core services. And when we said that in our strategic plan at the county, as well as during the service delivery review. But I think it would be reasonable to say that we can be an enabler as opposed to a provider. So I would like to explore going as far as 4, and that would mean including all 4, right? So in my answer, I'm saying if we go as far incentives and so on.
I couldn't agree more. And Dominique, you started to freeze up a bit there, and it's almost perfect because it reinforces the need. It is so frustrating for people who have to live through this. And any way this committee can convince and help people to understand, there's so many benefits if people have internet, and good internet. Maybe not perfect, but reasonably workable internet. And I'm the same situation as Duncan. Like Barry Field, the CEO of Swift, a man I got a lot of respect for. I remember one day and he said that everyone can get internet, but it'll cost money. And so it's not a problem that can't be solved, but each individual can go out and get internet if we put. I had to find mine, and but maybe Duncan and I are a little more tenacious than some of the others. There's a lot of people out there waiting, and unless we help them, I don't know who else is going to help them, and it's going to take money. But further comments?
Through your chair, it's Cecil at Malahide. And this is not to try to sound contradictory or anything to Dominique, because we're on the same team, obviously, but I do agree with what she says. A statement I've said in the past, and this is my personal opinion, the municipality, or in this case, the county, we are not a transport company, but we build highways, we maintain highways, we plow highways. We just rehabilitated our pier. We're not fishermen's, we're not in that business, but we build it. The municipalities will purchase land, upgrade it, make it reasonable for industrial, because we're not an industry, but we make these things available so that we can provide others the tools, the ability to grow. And I firmly believe that's something that we have to look at this. This may have to become, in essence, a utility of sorts. Don't think of it as just infrastructure. We're not in that business anymore. It's now a tool. And like Dominique said, it's infrastructure. If we're not going to put it in, someone else is might, but not in the area that we want. They're going to go for the most profitable area. If we consider this like any other building, a community center, an arena, those things we know generally, unfortunately, lose money, but they're there to bring services to people that don't have them. I think we have to look at infrastructure in the exact same manner. Some of the people on the committee are aware of this, others aren't. Malahide's in the middle of researching that right now with an outside vendor to see what the feasibility is. Do we play the role of the ISP? Do we play the role of providing the infrastructure for a third-party ISP? If it's of any help when we get to that point, I'm sure Dominique would be willing to share it. I have no issue sharing that with other municipalities to see what's being done. Maybe there are other municipalities that didn't know it was even feasible or possible. I know we're looking at the efficiency grant from a couple of years ago that we received, and part of that was making services accessible to our taxpayers. But if they don't have good internet, it doesn't really matter how many services we make electronic or make it web-based. So I had proposed the idea of maybe building infrastructure, towers as an example. It's not the best solution, obviously fiber is, but it's definitely a start, and it's more than what we have. And I think in a few months, we're going to have a pretty good answer and a pretty good direction on if it's feasible or not and what role we're going to play. So just my 5 cents.
Dominique, go ahead.
You did, and if I freeze up, let me know. I can turn off the camera. I think we're saying the same thing. The way I read the 4th level of the spectrum, I think is what you're saying, Cecil, that we would build the infrastructure, we would own the infrastructure. I wasn't quite prepared, and I know in Malahide we will get additional insight to compare the feasibility between 4 and 5, because I interpret 5 here as owning the network and operating the network, which to me that's a whole. You said we don't operate, transport company, and so that's why.
I tend to agree with you. Duncan, go ahead. You're muted.
I understand Malahide's perspective of looking into this, and certainly that's probably something that will benefit us all. But I'm kind of wondering, is the mandate of this committee to put an Elgin solution together, or are we going to end up breaking into tribes and everybody doing their own thing? What's the committee's thought on it? Is it something that's going to be fed up from the bottom? Is it going to be something that's going to be fed from the top down, or is it going to be a hybrid of both? And I think everybody is so anxious to get on with this project that we'll grasp at just about anything at all that we can grab a hold of.
Dominique, go ahead.
My view, thank you, Mr. Chair. My view on that, it's I think we need to tackle this from every possible angle, and so if there are resources at with our local municipal, the key is to coordinate and to share information. And I think having Cecil and myself and ensuring there's good communication, I think we need to grab all opportunities that are available, and if it's coordinated, then whatever Malahide cannot address, then we can with Elgin. I think there's a role for all levels of government, and that's provincial and federal, but as well different municipal tiers. So to me, it's a team effort.
And I don't know what Malahide is doing, Dom, but sitting here from Central Elgin, and I know there's a highway, and that becomes our boundary. So what you're doing invariably ends up either aiding or assisting or fighting against our neighbor. We may not interfere much with West Elgin because of geography and the distance, but I know not like your proposal. Are you looking to build towers? Is that I really don't know much about it.
Cecil, feel free to comment. I think you can.
Yep, I was actually just about to, but you. So the initial premise behind it, yes, it is towers, and it was born out of the fact that we only have Eastlink in our area, and we have a number of sites that we want to connect with private connections. And the unfortunate part is when I wanted more bandwidth between these sites, the cost from the local incumbent was very cost prohibitive. Doing some just basic analysis on my own, initially it was just based on a 10-year payback. The cost of building towers just for the use of the municipality to connect our remote sites would be recovered in 10 years between the cost increase of the local incumbent plus any hardware plus any tower construction. So that was where the initial idea came from. When the efficiency grant came out a couple of years ago and I saw there was some additional funds there, that got me thinking farther that it doesn't just have to be municipal access. And forgive me for using maybe the wrong numbers, but a 100-foot tower on average might be sufficient for the municipality. But if I can afford to build a 150-foot tower, the municipality can still connect itself at the 100 feet, but that leaves 50 additional feet that could be used by any third-party ISP. We have 2 properties that they're not the highest points in our municipality, but they're pretty darn close to being the highest points in the municipality. So putting two very large towers up at the highest points that we have access to is going to give a tremendous advantage to any third-party ISP that might be able to occupy that. A trade-off on that, obviously, is we can charge rental fees. And so there's additional revenue for the municipality to offset the cost of those towers. But even further along, we have a situation down by Port Bruce where our fire and emergency services cannot get consistent radio coverage. And that's pretty bad when there's a fire or there's a drowning or whatever the case is. So again, I'm looking at this from a perspective of, all right, well, I can put a tower up for just that, but if I can have a little bit more money, it can now become a municipal, internet connection, or a little bit taller still, it now becomes the radio, the municipality, and a third-party wireless ISP to provide coverage in an area where, unless you live on a main road, you have nothing. So I'm trying to approach it, and you can ask Dominique when I presented this, I'm really trying to stress that it's not a one-trick pony, it's not a one-use solution. There are many possible uses to this, being providing connectivity to the third-party, CB radio, so on and so forth. One of the questions that Duncan had about, are we all doing it by our own, or are we being complementary, or are we hindering? The entire intent here is that given if there's enough space on it, there is no reason why it could not be part of the county's solution. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Ultimately, fiber is the perfect solution, but if we have to get something out sooner than later, yes, wireless is not the best, but it gets it out sooner. It gets you out there talking, broadcasting as you build the rest of the network. And then once the rest of the network's built, these towers can become backup points. I think PacketWorks does that in West Elgin currently. If one of their main fiber links go down between cities, they use a wireless bridge to back it up. So that there's many uses to this, and I can still see even after all another network being built, there's still the opportunity for third parties such as ExploreNet or whoever it might be to use those towers, because it's going to help foster competition, which is just going to keep prices hopefully at a reasonable cost if we have multiple medias and multiple companies being able to provide it. So I hope that kind of explains what we're looking at. Obviously, nothing's set in stone, and we're going through the feasibility of it right now, but that's sort of the shortened history of what we were looking at.
Well, I'm convinced that towers probably are the way to go. Looking big picture, if say a quarter of a mile into central Elgin and it's higher ground, if we're all cooperating, maybe that's where that tower should go. I know that the Kettle Creek Conservation was looking to put towers up because they needed to do business. And I said, maybe talk to us first so we're not duplicating things or competing against each other. What about some of the natural towers out there? When I drive to St. Thomas, I look at the City of St. Thomas, a big tower there, and my understanding that's going to be decommissioned. Rather than bring it down, probably stand there for a long, long time. Some of our neighbors, some of these large grain operators, there's a lot of towers up, they're used as towers. Our water towers, have they been exhausted, and whether we can use them and whether they're available? I don't know those technical answers, but maybe we have towers out there already.
If I may answer, if that's okay, I
Certainly.
completely agree. I know 15 years ago or so, I had actually approached Central Elgin about using their water towers just to do some point-to-point stuff just for your own internal use. The similar premise here. I think there are a lot of towers there that are available. Some are not at sufficient height, but at this point, something's better than nothing. So as for using private, I have no issue with that. My perspective is, at least if we build it and we own it, we know that it's going to be a minimum standard. My locations, as an example, I have backup power. So if I'm worried about power outages, at least I know my central locations are going to be providing power. I know that's not always the case with private. If it is, that's great. Then by all means, we should engage them. But no, I completely agree. There's lots of infrastructure. I do a lot of driving myself between who I support in the west and this side, and there's a lot of empty space. There's also a lot of existing private towers or silos or grain elevators that are occupied by third-party WISPs right now, and they have very restrictive agreements in place. You cannot co-locate. You cannot, put additional equipment up there. So that's where I would look at municipalities being more open to sharing the space if the space is available, us included.
Dominique, go ahead.
No, I was just going to suggest, Mr. Chair, just as far as the agenda and the plan, I know there are a lot of questions that we have to answer and further investigate. And I think the idea today was to regroup and in ways update our action plan, because so much of the action plan that we developed at the very beginning has already been accomplished. And now, so I just wanted to make sure there are any number of topics we need to explore so that so the questions that have been raised by yourself and others, I think, and the points are very good. I would just like to make sure that we also, and then Julie posed a question as far as, where we want to be on the spectrum. And so if we could address that, that would be great.
Mike, go ahead.
So getting back to the spectrum, I think I can echo what Dominique has said. I would see really a blend of the third and fourth box. There's no shoehorning us into one of these boxes, and no need to. And I'm glad to hear actually that there's not an appetite for municipal owned and operated, because I think that is a potential disaster, quite frankly. As a private citizen and taxpayer, I think that would be the best use of county funds. But certainly, I think the middle of the road is often the best place to travel. I think that really makes sense for Elgin. And I see the need for components of that fourth box of municipally owned in infrastructure that's linked into to existing ISPs for furthering that. I think I don't want to bring the discussion back to towers too much. Actually, I'm not a great fan of wireless, but I do agree that it's an interim solution. I think Cecil used that word, and it may be a very long interim solution in certain areas, but I don't think we want to get focused on that. I see some irony. I don't know if everyone's noticed, but I see some irony in the fact that Eastlink just knocked down its 300-foot tower on the east edge of Elmer, which would have made an ideal point for Malahide as well as BAM perhaps in central Elgin. But anyway, that's an aside. But that's where I see the county position on that spectrum, if you will, is certainly right in the middle with elements of municipally owned infrastructure. I think it's just going back to fiber versus towers for a minute. I know we've heard a couple of people that were in the wireless industry at our most recent meeting say that fiber will never go to every home, and I challenge that. I know it not necessarily will go to every home, perhaps in my lifetime, but it can go to every home. It is a matter of cost, and I often refer to a little company called Quadro Communications, which is a small independent telephone company up in the St. Mary's area. That company, it's cooperative, so it's not driven by profit like a share company, for instance, but that little company put fiber to every home in its service area, and its service area is really large. It covers 4 municipalities, not the entire municipalities, but that little company with its own wherewithal and basically self-funded fiber to every farm, every home in that entire serving area, which I think is about, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 total customers in a fairly large geographic area. So I think those are the kinds of things we should always be cognizant of it and never say never. But I would support a blended use of towers and fiber, and perhaps there's something else out there. Maybe even satellite has a place to play to that as well. Although that one really concerns me from a cost perspective for the users. But that's kind of my 2 cents on the spectrum as I see it.
Further comments? Duncan?
Yeah, it's a little little difficult right now because as I'm on the Zoom call here, then I don't have the agenda or the spectrum up in front of me, so I'm kind of just at a loss as to exactly keeping in fresh in my mind what the spectrum actually looks like. So
We'll share it again.
yeah, I think that would help. Trouble with working off one device.
That does. Municipality built and ISP operated.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to drive it. We want to get it. We want to get it operating. Further thoughts?
Just used to looking from Alhide. I do think that this, Duncan was alluding to it earlier. Are we doing it by ourselves? Are we doing it at the county? So on and so forth. I like to take that and combine it with Dominique's point of view. Everybody should be looking at every angle possible so that it becomes a truly made in Elgin solution. Elgin County maybe becomes the glue between those solutions, or the bridges between solutions, or the expertise between solutions. Or even I think somebody else said it, the coordinator of sorts, who's doing what and where and how. And maybe collectively we can all find a solution that works best. There will be hybrids, obviously, but I think ultimately that's maybe the best role that the county and in the committee in this case maybe plays, is to bring the patchwork together, unify it, and try to find a truly unique Elgin solution.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I can add to that I think this committee agreed that we would use a two-pronged approach, that recognizing there are urgent, very much urgent needs that we need to address, hence the perhaps emphasis on towers, you know, in the very short term, or whatever short term means nowadays, but with an eye to that sort of future proofing, because I totally agree with Mike that I don't think it is impossible to get fiber to every house eventually. I mean, if we had taken that approach to electricity, I wouldn't have electricity right now. So yeah, so I just wanted to remind that I think as a committee, we agreed to pursue the made in Elgin solution would be that two-prong. What can we do to address urgent needs in as short term as possible, while looking at long-term solutions?
All right, Julie, do you want to continue on, or are you getting? Where do you want to go from here?
So we'll just advance to the next slide. I think we have we've gathered some great information from the committee, and I probably should just let you know what staff would like to do with the information that we're getting today. So we're hoping to get some clearer direction about the committee's priorities in order to pull together kind of a background or a framework for the committee to start working on a made in Elgin solution. So hopefully as we work through this roadmap and we kind of gauge where we are on the spectrum and get a sense of kind of your financial comfort level and which options you'd like to pursue, we can still pursue more than one option and research those options within a framework. But I think we do really have to start putting pen to paper, and there is some urgency associated, as Councillor McPhail alluded to setting aside some money and perhaps starting to solidify a plan. So we're hoping to gather enough information today to just get kind of the start of a framework that then the committee can continue to tweak and modify according to your preferences, and then we'll eventually take a plan to County Council. But I think that framework is a critical component, and that's how we intend to proceed, but of course we'll do as directed by the committee. So the next piece that's covered in the Roma broadband document is financial options. One is broadband levy. And the example they used was the town of Caledon, where they have an annual broadband tax levy. And the recommendation here is that council determine what financial tools can be used to help incentivize private ISPs. And then going back to the spectrum a little bit, where there is a section on advocating for action from other levels of government, letting the market operate on its own. I think the local governments have a key role to play in streamlining processes and, as Councillor Jiguer mentioned, reducing red tape. Also, using what assets we have in place and leveraging those. So they have included a section about a dig once policy. We certainly heard about that from Chatham Kent, where the construction of fiber optic conduit is part of any construction project. There's some exploration into municipal access agreements, and this is the most widely used tool to grant consent and set the terms for individual carriers to access the municipal rights of way and to put in wireline connections, and then streamlining the existing policies that we have in place. So any thoughts about what financial options the committee might be interested in recommending to council? Is it an incentive program? Is it an investment in a dig once policy? Because we know that that comes at a considerable cost. There are some less costly options here, like streamlining existing processes, which I think should happen anyways. But any thoughts that the committee has would be very helpful.
I guess my thought as far as the financial end, you know, how close to a number are we? We know it's, you know, somewhere between $1 and $10 million. Do we know, like, even if we had the ask, do we know how much to ask for? We're still struggling with that, aren't we?
We are, yes. I think in the absence of a framework and some clearer direction, it is hard to put a dollar figure to this. And it also depends on whether you'll be using this money to kind of augment provincial and federal funding that's available, whether it's truly as just an incentive in and of itself with no expected connection to federal and provincial funding. There's a lot of considerations when it comes to how much money to set aside. But really, if the committee felt passionately about the dig once policy, then we could assign a dollar figure to that and bring back some more concrete facts. But right now, there are a lot of considerations on the table, and it would be helpful to kind of refine the committee's preferences.
Dominique?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Julie, can you, at one point in the previous meetings, I think you had some concerns about incentives, and I think you were going to look into that. So is there anything we need to know as we consider that as a possibility?
Yes, we did receive comments from the county solicitor. I think we just haven't brought those forward to the committee. Am I correct, Catherine? Yeah, so that's an oversight on our part. I appreciate the reminder. We'll get that to the committee ASAP. I think we got it about 2 months ago.
I think we all have a lot, probably you, on your plate, so that's not a problem, but it probably something to help us consider. I know personally, my takeaway from previous presentations, I was not sold on the dig once as being a top priority. The way it was presented it's nice in theory, but when we analyze how projects our own county projects are done, I didn't see that as a priority. On the other hand, I think anything policy related, like streamlining, again, being an enabler, that I would definitely support.
If memory serves me correct, at one time I thought that would be a big help. I think, Mike, you didn't back that up, and you're certainly the man that's out there with the knowledge. Am I remembering correctly?
I know I gave staff quite a bit of information on that, and I'll be honest, I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's workable in some respects, and not to get really into the weeds here, but major intersections, if duct is always a priority for road crossings and major intersections, I think that can be valuable. If it's a matter of running, 20 kilometers of fiber optic duct along a county road because we're redoing the road, I think that does become problematic, and getting people to use it, maintaining the infrastructure while it's empty. I think it can be very expensive, but perhaps on a, if we focus that down a little bit in certain instances, like the major intersections. 401 is a good example. We heard from Chatham Kent how they actually facilitated a county funded bore under the river. I was going to say Thames, but yeah, that's the right river. Get my Grands and my Thames mixed up since I'm in between both of them. Something like that. If the county was going underneath 401 anywhere, for instance, I can see that that's the perfect place to do the dig once kind of application, but on a global basis across the county, I'm not sure it really would achieve what the committee and the county and the people in the county need to achieve it. Yeah.
Cecil Formaldehyde, just a unique one. I don't know if it's viable here, and only because we had one replaced in the last little while. Bridges. I know it's not very often you have to cross a river or a creek, but what about when a bridge is being built or refurbished? What's the idea of how complex, how challenging is it to put conduit across there? Is that even a viable option? But if it is, it's maybe a very specialized, not so much a dig once, but build once, and maybe make it available for whoever might require it.
Do you have your hand up, Duncan?
Well, I did. I would just went through my mind that my understanding is Chatham Kent is farther down the road than what we are in Elgin here. And have we reviewed Chatham Kent's policies, their funding model, and any results that they could share with us because of the actions that they have taken?
Good question.
I believe we have.
Mhm.
We have.
Yes.
That's something that's been discussed at the committee meeting here. Okay, so you can just starting, and there was nothing in that any of those things that could be moved to a direction in Elgin County, or was it something that the committee didn't feel was warranted?
Who can answer?
Cecil Formaldehyde. I seem to recall in their presentation that there was certain parts of that solution that were legalese, protected from eyes. So I don't know how much they'd be willing to share with us just because they had their legal agreement signed.
Okay, so was there an actual request to Chatham Kent to share that information other than the forum that the lady that was ahead of it participated in it? Have we made an official request to Chatham Kent to have maybe some more in-depth conversations on their policy or their funding? I would think if they're putting money into broadband in Chatham Kent, that funding number would something of public record.
I know Councillor McGrail from Chatham Kent serves on the SWIFT, and she has graciously offered to share her knowledge anytime.
So I can say that, Chatham Kent's investment was $6 million.
Yes, that is correct.
And how long?
And I can add that they were able to share with us the the details that are public, but their agreements with Tech Savvy restrict them from getting into anything that into any components of the agreement itself. So it was very restrictive, the agreement that they had in terms of their ability to share.
Okay. So Chatham-Kent is dealing with a sole source provider in Chatham-Kent then?
Correct.
And I believe, if I may, Mr. Chair, I believe they also are looking at operating either in partnership to the tune of almost $500,000 per year in terms of their team, their digital team. So yeah, so I think in previous minutes and PowerPoint presentations, we probably pull up all of those details, but I think other than some of the challenges and infrastructure building challenges, it wasn't a model that jumped out as, being able to replicate fully. But it was informative, but perhaps not more than that, other than, like I said, the rivers and bridges. And I think that's a good point that Mike brings up as far as the dig once. We could limit in our framework, we could choose to limit that policy to only major intersections or bridges, highways, the major barriers.
Certainly, I've heard that intersections like crossing MTO, like number 3 highway, that is a challenge with MTO. At least I've been told that. I think, Duncan, we had issues with them back in the plow match days.
Oh my, we've dealt with them over the years of getting access underneath the 401, and it's mind numbing and absolutely horrendously expensive.
Yeah. So a little more cooperation from them. Maybe that's in our chats with our MPPs, we could mention that.
Certainly, one dig is certainly an investment in the future, but it's something that's not helping the people that desperately are in need of some type of broadband in the present.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Cecil's point about bridges is a good example of where that might make a lot of sense. Though there are whether even other utilities. I know natural gas, trying to get it across the Otter Creek is a challenge in places, and I know there are areas. Actually, I think I was speaking with someone from Central Elgin not too long ago about internet service providers not wishing to cross a river, for instance. So the county implementing a policy where communications ducts were part of a bridge replacement, or were part of if the county's putting sewer or water or something underneath of a creek. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I don't think the cost of that would be terribly prohibitive compared to a firm across the border one dig once policy. I think that would be good policy for the county, and I think it can be an incentive for ISPs to extend that little bit extra down the road to pick up 2 or 3 more customers even.
Julie, you have weekly or you have regular meetings with the local CAOs. That'd be a good forum to pass information like that on.
Certainly, yes, we meet on a weekly basis.
Well, that'd be an opportunity to get everyone going in the same direction. Good discussion. Do you want to carry on, Julie?
We're happy to, if you would like us to, unless the committee has had enough. Keep going.
What's your will and pleasure? I think keep cutting wood for a few more minutes.
Okay, so the next section is champion the need, and that is something this committee has really committed to from day one. And this links closely back to the framework that we're proposing staff develop for the committee to review. And that would include the number of households communities that are currently not served or underserved, really layering all of the information that we have and putting it into one spot so that the committee can use this as part of its planning. The next slide talks about building digital capacity. And they suggest that the community should work to improve digital literacy both within the municipality and across the county as a whole. And one way to do this would be to adopt a digital readiness strategy to make sure that the skills and capacity are there to use devices, software, online tools. This is something that could, in theory, be run through, say, public libraries or local governments. So there is a bit of a digital readiness roadmap there for the committee's consideration. Next steps identified in the roadmap include, use local data to identify gaps, identify local champions, so even those beyond the committee, leverage power of provincial, regional, and local associations, MPP, certainly the warden and I had discussions with both Jeff Urich and Karen Vecchio to advocate for our fair share of broadband funding and to discuss and get their support for any sort of made in Elgin solution at a really preliminary stage. And then work to build digital capacity and advocate for systems that enhance digital inclusion and are viable and sustainable for end users. So any comments on building digital capacity? Hearing none, we'll jump ahead, I guess, to invest in shovel-worthy projects.
Can
And
I
this
jump
is,
in? Sorry.
Sorry, it's hard. We can't see everyone on the screen with the screen sharing. My apologies.
No worries. So first on the digital readiness and literacy, I think that's a must. And I think there's so much we can do, because I was quite interested and somewhat surprised actually at the frustration of ISPs. Like, we often talk about the frustration of customers and our residents, but ISPs are frustrated too in their customers not fully understanding how the system works, even how to make the most of the tools that they do have. And I would love for us to partner with the libraries and conduct community workshops and present, so that things could be presented by a neutral party, so that again, there's that trust and understanding. So I think there's a lot we can do, and that's something we can do in the short term that could alleviate some of the frustration. And I think there's something in there as well in terms, I don't know if it goes back to your earlier step around championing. I think there's a role that I haven't fully articulated, but there's a role we could play in terms of consolidating all the various frustrations of, and sometimes complaints. And I think that we have correspondence today as a good example of that, because I do feel that each resident ends up trying to fend for themselves. And so with the combination of not being fully educated and knowing how everything works and having to learn everything on their own, I think there's a role there that if we had a collective way of appealing to different telecoms and say, what about boosting towers, and what about, so rather than having individuals making those phone calls and those requests, if somehow we played a coordinating role, I think that could be very powerful and could yield good results. And the other point I wanted to say around championing, because I wasn't sure where else in the roadmap it could fit, was the concept of the mapping. My understanding, and I think Mike mentioned it earlier, that it is still an issue, the mapping issue, but my understanding is that with additional advocacy, we in countries. And so I see a championing role. So the championing is not just about constantly talking about the gaps and the needs and the need for funding, I think we could also advocate for good customer service and for different policies, like at the federal level, for example.
Thank you, Dominique. Do you want to carry on, Julie?
Certainly. So the next slide talks about invest in shovel-worthy projects. So the suggestions here are to advocate for more public sector funding, and that would be a longer-term strategy. In the short term, focus on identifying strategic and shovel-worthy projects. And while they may not be shovel-ready now, they could be built into a business case with support from neighboring municipalities. So the examples there were the SWIFT program and the EORN program. Public funding will track behind technological advancements. So council should consider whether investment made is being done in a way that's scalable and future-proofed, was one of their kind of cautionary messages. Any comments there?
Don't see any.
Great. I won't jump ahead so quickly this time, but the next slide is about partnerships. So they suggest partnering with neighboring municipal governments, local institutions, and public sector organizations to build a case for connectivity demand. So I think we have heard that some funding applications specify or ask you to specify whether you are connecting or partnering with other municipalities or public sector organizations to accomplish any sort of projects. So determining those relationships early on is important. As well, relationship building with ISPs is certainly something that the committee took on as one of their first priorities. Create a line of communication between telecoms, ISPs, and LDCs where the business case is further along. So that's kind of a midterm strategy. And then reach out to existing municipal groups for advice on RFPs, ROIs, and any other information that they might have. So a lot of these options are already well underway by the committee. And the next slide is a discussion of next steps. So I've shared with you kind of my high-level recommendations for kind of the staff takeaways. So we'll use and compile all of the information that committee members have shared today while reviewing the Roma roadmap. And we'll take some time, but work quickly to pull together a framework so that the committee can start dissecting the framework and create a Made in Elgin solution. And I think a request for funding from County Council or any sort of place marker in the 2021 budget goes hand in hand with that framework. So the sooner we can pull that together and even come up with kind of a high level concept for this solution to Elgin's connectivity challenges, the better. And as the committee has witnessed, you have staff support to continue to push things ahead. So we will do as directed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have on the presentation.
Thank you, Julie. And then I think we've already noted, I believe tomorrow is the RFP for SWIFT in Elgin. So that'll be another piece of the puzzle as we get some information from. I think we're moving. Go ahead.
I just have, I'm part of the RFP team, the review team for SWIFT, and I just wanted to, so that everyone is clear about expected timelines. We won't have the RFP proponent review process completed until kind of the end of February. So early March is when we may know who the successful proponents are and what the applications for Elgin might look like.
Okay. Questions, comments for Julie?
Councillor Pennings has a question, Mr. Warden.
Absolutely, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment I feel that the Swift RFPs are very important from the perspective of trying to choose a list of top priorities for me anyway. Because from my perspective, wrapping up the final mile connection or helping providers complete that final mile and serve as many residents as possible, we won't know where to focus that energy until the RFPs are wrapped up. So it's really tough. Like we can make some top priorities and probably a lot of them will be accurate, but it may shift dramatically depending on how the RFP sorts out.
Yes, like playing chess. And unfortunately, we can't speed that up, but it is coming.
Yeah. And so I
Dominique?
can further comment, Mr. Chair, that I fully agree. And I think, so in that roadmap, we saw that there are multiple components, and I agreed. So the RFPs will be mostly about infrastructure. And so we won't know where our investment would be best, if any. Meanwhile, I think we can continue to look at the other pieces in terms of literacy and advocacy and championing mapping. There's still quite a bit of work, but so I agree. It's a key piece of the puzzle.
But not to speak for Duncan, but I think we're not too many weeks away from finalizing the budget for the county of Elgin, and we do not want to get, say, the 1st of May when the weather's good and we get projects that we'd like to do, and then it says, "Oh, we haven't got any money till in the budget till next year." Am I speaking correctly, Duncan, or? I think you're muted.
I think my concern about it is, are we not talking a 10-year budget? Is this something that's going out 10 years? And if we don't get a placeholder at the start of the 10 years, where do we have the opportunity to jump in somewhere down the road? As far as this committee needing a lot of money at this point in time, I don't see that. But just as long as there's an ability at some point in time and being able to compete with all the other issues that are out there, that the committee has recognized that this is important and it needs to be looked at as an essential service such as roads or water or anything else that the municipality provides. So this 10-year budget is new to me, and so if somebody can explain, is there an opportunity to jump in mid 10-year?
Go ahead.
With the 10-year plan, the goal is always to anything that we know or forecasting, or at least putting in placeholders, we should put in as soon as possible. That's the purpose of a 10-year plan. The 10-year plan is a dynamic process, and can be.
Good old internet again.
So Jim's actually at the county building. So, oh no, he's not. He's at home.
Are you back, Jim? We lost you.
See me now?
We can now. You may have to backtrack a bit.
So with the 10-year plan, anything that we can put in as soon as we have information available, or we can put in forecasted amounts, the sooner the better. That's the goal of a plan, is to be proactive. If we were to approve the 2021 budget without money in for broadband, the implication there is that we would either be in the short term be taking money out of reserve to fund it, and then we would raise money in the 2022 through the 2022 taxes subsequently to help reestablish any reserves that we might have diminished in the process of rolling out some broadband. So there are options available. We do have money, unallocated reserves in the current plan that could be used, so that a decision doesn't have to be made immediately. There's still opportunity sometime during the course of the year for this committee to make a decision and go forward to council and request that funds be allocated. And then we would tax accordingly in 2022.
Duncan.
You know, as this committee sits here in the beginning of 2021, if we live so long at the end of this 10-year cycle, we're still going to be talking remedying broadband in Elgin County. This is not going to be a quick solution. And as Jim said, if you have a long-term goal, the sooner that you get in and recognize the fact that this is going to be a long haul, the better it seems that it would be for the last 2 years of term of this council, and certainly setting up the next term, because I don't think that the band issue is going to go away for some time.
Dominique, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add is that, I mean, no different than in last year, we looked at a 10-year plan that did not include the facilities maintenance, for example, because the results of that study were not available. And we had a heads up that as more data becomes available, we will know exactly. And you saw this year that we received that information, and the 10-year plan has been updated to reflect the amount that needs to be invested over 10 years. So I do believe we have the same opportunity to do that. And I guess I'm hearing like almost the need to earmark an amount and which in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you know, to match the budget cycle. And to me, that would just be just a shot in the dark. And I don't know that there's a need for that. I don't see it, because I've seen us adjust and wait for actual amounts to be available in an actual plan like the facilities management plan. So I'm not concerned about our ability to adjust. I don't believe that earmarking something is going to make the difference as to whether we will move forward, and it doesn't convey more or less that it's a priority. We all know it's a priority, and we've made that clear. So
I'll speak fairly bluntly. I heard comments from a Elgin County meeting where concerns were, we had to cut corners, we had to tighten the belt on the budget. And if that, I want this committee, this broadband, if we have money that's right there, like we're going to build a road, the money's there. If this broadband has to take, this committee members need to know that we're not going to back down at the 9th hour and said, hey, things are tough and we need to reduce the taxes kind of thing. I have no hesitation putting a line number in there. Doesn't mean we have to spend it. We have to show everybody that we are definitely going to go through with this. Further comments? Catherine? Okay. All right, Julie, you've got enough to go back and regroup and come back with some suggestions? Busy afternoon.
I think so. It depends on COVID, but I will certainly, my team and I will work as expeditiously on this as possible.
All right. Are we at the point of picking get calendars out, look for another date for next meeting? No, Mr. Chairman, I think there's still an item of correspondence to consider. Oh, yes, sorry. There was a letter sent. Can you share that, or do we need to discuss that? Because there were some quite a powerful, passionate letter. Has everyone had a chance to see it and read it? That was down in the east end of the down your neck of the woods, Mike. Care to comment on it? Being it's from your
Yeah, I can make some brief comments. Actually, I don't challenge what the one I guess there was two communications actually, and I believe they were related parties. But the comments about the cellular service, I have no doubt in my mind that this person was given that information by a technician who was trying to explain something away. But just from my perspective and for the committee's benefit, Cecil might chime in here a bit, but it's quite frankly what he told her is absolute nonsense. Cellular, just to put that into perspective, cellular tower transmitter outputs are in the neighborhood of 40 to 60 watts, always have been. There's been no move by the cellular industry to crank back wattage for business purposes or any other purposes. I'm not sure why he told her that. And again, I don't doubt for a minute that he told her that, but that really is a red herring. The only way, in my view anyway, is to increase cellular coverage across the county is more cellular towers and fiber backhaul to those cellular towers. So full sympathy with the position. Our cell service here isn't much better. It's a little bit better from one provider to the next. But that contacting the cellular providers and asking them why they've dramatically reduced the power of the transmitters is just it's not the issue. And it's unfortunate that she was told that. I have no doubt that she was. As far as the actual internet complaints, again, full sympathy. I'm in much the same situation as the people in question. So it's a real problem, obviously, at this end of the county, like it is in many parts of our county. But that cellular thing, I think the committee should be very careful how it deals with that information.
Okay, appreciate those comments. Do we need to send a reply to this lady or receive and file, or what's your suggestion, Julie?
I would suggest that you acknowledge receipt of the letter at the very least on behalf of the committee.
We need a resolution for that, or just direction? Resolution? I'd look for mover and seconder, please.
So just before the motion, so is there any information we could pass along so to help again to improve her literacy on understanding how the tower works and how coverage works? So could we play a bit of a role?
What do you think, Mike? Can you assist us in that without getting in trouble?
I can try, and I don't mean to lean on Cecil here, but he's a wireless guy too. He might be able to put it a little bit better from a county perspective. But actually, when Dominic, I just want to make another comment about Dominic's point and the education part. One of the other elements of I'm not sure it was in her letter or the other parties, but you mentioned ISP frustrations. One of the things that just as a provider kind of has always driven me crazy is people use Wi-Fi and internet as synonymous terms, and they are not. A lot of the feedback in our customer survey complained about it doesn't even work on the back porch. Well, that has absolutely nothing to do with your internet service coming into your home. You could have a gigabit internet and have lousy Wi-Fi coverage on your back porch. You could have DSL service like I have and have wonderful Wi-Fi service on the back porch. And that's part of that education thing. I turned my Eastlink router on bridge mode and put a couple of really good quality routers with wireless capability throughout the house. And I've got great Wi-Fi coverage, horrible internet, but great Wi-Fi coverage. So that's part of that customer education thing, I think, that Dominic was referring to as well. So it's interesting, and I think perhaps the county could play a bit of a role there. I think it's a huge role, by the way. I think you could spend a lot of manpower managing that, but that's a bit of a wandering answer, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Cecil, are you up for giving some direction on writing the letter?
Maybe not so much the contents of the letter, but maybe just to extend more of what Mike was saying, and that is I think it's great if we could try to educate this, but as somebody who's done IT support for a long time, it's kind of a slippery slope. You give some information and all of a sudden it's your fault, and or I need more information or I need more help, and then there's a time component, a cost component, and I guess I don't really have an answer. I'm sorry.
Okay. Dominique?
So to be fair, I don't think the committee should be providing, I think, information per se, or crafting the letter. However, if on the committee there's advice as to resources that exist, like to reply and point this person to some tips on maximizing coverage. And by the way, did you know that this is how a tower works? Produce that kind of information or even materials. So if there's any, and perhaps it's our staff in the library can do a little bit of research. I will look up, I mentioned at the last time at one conference, they sent out, they pointed us to some tutorials that exist that were designed exactly for that. So perhaps there's something there. So I think in the letter, if we could point the individual to existing resources rather than committing us, because I agree, this could just then never end. We don't want to become advice providers per se on an individual basis.
All right. Perhaps just let her know that we have received and discussed the letter and file it. So I'd look for mover and seconder on that. Dominique, you move that. And Justin is seconding that. Are we ready for the question? Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Councillor Jaguar,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Mike Andrews,
Yes.
Justin Pennings,
Yes.
Joshua Curia,
Yes.
Warden Marks.
Yes.
6-0, the motion is carried.
Thank you, Catherine. Julie, are we ready? The end of the agenda, looking for a meeting date?
Yes, Mr. Warden.
Are we still on track for 2 weeks away, or is that too soon for you?
We'll make it work.
That would be the 28th of January. How's that look for everyone? 2 o'clock?
Good here.
Joshua, Justin?
Yes.
Good. All right. Julie, question?
Just a comment that I do have a conflict at 3 o'clock that day with the Ontario Health team. So I'd be happy to attend at 2 o'clock, but I would have to leave at 3.
Is there any, can we move it to 1 o'clock?
There's a Southwestern Public Health call at 1. I think it's fine. I think if I just come and prepare a report, share the report, and then I can leave. Okay.
All right, we'll do all the hard stuff right at the beginning. All right, I want to thank everyone for your participation, your time. I don't know whose feedback that is, but we're getting there. Thank you very much, and everyone stay safe and have a good afternoon. Oh, I need a motion to adjourn, don't I?
I was just about to jump in. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn, please. Mike and Joshua. Call the question, please, Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Councillor Jaguar,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Mike Andrews,
Yes.
Justin Pennings,
Yes.
Joshua Curia,
Yes.
Warden Marks.
Yes.
6-0, the motion is carried.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.